This conference was Elliott Masie's Learning 2016. I was a member of the 30 Under 30 program last year, where they highlighted individuals under the age of 30 in the world of learning. So they asked myself and one other member to come back and kind of work on some projects at the conference. Our strategy, once we found the space and had the materials, we're going to facilitate the start, give them some basic guidelines on what we wanted them to do. We decided on 30 minutes to figure out all the puzzles and escape and essentially get out of their way. We had no preconceived notions. We wanted to go into it almost blank, help them, but not push them towards any particular solution. So what is an escape room? A real-life team-based puzzle exercise where you're locked in a room and need to solve puzzles together to escape. Let's take the gamification model and ask the participants to design our very own learning escape room. We told everybody, hey, we got up on the stage during the keynote in the morning. We said, hey, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, we're gonna be in this room. If anybody wants to do something engaging, pushing the envelope of the industry, come help us out. Let's do something fun. The participants we had that were volunteers, they actually created all the puzzles. But then we had a whole nother group sign up for it the next day that came in and actually ran through it. It was a 2-day thing. So on Monday, we had the group create it, and on Tuesday, we actually ran it in the afternoon. So we had locks and latches, paper and markers, we had tape, scissors, whiteboard and markers, flip chart paper, a word lock container, 6 boxes of varying sizes. We had Halloween candy, and we also had a cipher key. So we almost had 40 volunteers come in and out throughout about a 5-6 hour period. About 16 of the 40 original people that came in were really committed throughout the day from about 1 o'clock till about 7 to helping us go through the puzzles, making sure we understood the solution so that we could run it the next day. We were given the ability to run it 4 times. We ran it starting at 1 o'clock we ran it half an hour, and then we ran it every 45 minutes. We had to turn people away after a while because there were just too many people for the size of the room and the puzzles we had, which was pretty amazing because we didn't know if we were gonna get 3 people to do it or go through it or 5 or 100, we had no idea. And then what we wanted to do was brainstorm some themes. We settled on communication because no matter what industry you're at, as all creative learning professionals at the conference, communication's always key. We had 4 main tables, and each of the 4 tables would include 1 puzzle chain. Since we had needed 4 puzzle structures, we came up with 4 types of communication, which were listening, different types of communication, such as verbal, nonverbal, that kind of thing, persuasion and influence, and emotional intelligence in communication. There's a number of different types of puzzle chains you can use. What we call a disconnected puzzle chain. Each station was its own puzzle, and all the clues for that puzzle were in that corner of the room. They had to solve each of the 4 puzzles, but they could do it in any order, with any amount of people. Once they solved one, there were more people to huddle around the 3 remaining and the 2 remaining, and then once the 1 remaining, then you had everybody working towards one goal at the end. Once they figure out the first 4, they had a final cipher puzzle to complete, and then they were done and they escaped. So group dynamics, the groups that were building the actual escape room. Group 1 was types of communication. So they politely and really listened to each other, took their time, nobody spoke over each other, and in turn they were able to develop the most elaborate and difficult puzzles out of all the 4 groups. But they made just as much sense to solve from a participant perspective. They weren't necessarily harder, but they were more complex and elaborate, and they made a little bit more sense from the perspective of communication and that theme. Group 2 was our listening group. They kind of did a rapid prototype. They were the most efficient creative group. They actually used the internet for a puzzle solution, something they built right in the room right there. It was really cool what people are able to do just in hours time or so. The third group we had was the emotional intelligence group. There were a couple members that really challenged for control, and they ended up not coming up with 4 puzzles that led to the next. They actually came up with like 2 separate puzzles, and each one got put together, and then that was the final puzzle. So it was a little difficult, but we didn't want to intervene. We wanted to see what would come out of this, most of all. We didn't want to push them towards one way or the other. But they used listening and specific workplace scenarios for all their puzzles. So that was really interesting to see. And then the final group, persuasion and influence. Members came and went throughout the about 5-6 hour period. They would settle on it. They would say, we have our idea, we're gonna build it. 20 minutes later, we're starting over. And they started over literally about a dozen times with a couple different people leading the charge. And they were the only group to not use boxes. It created a lot of artwork, either with the pens we had, big sheets of paper, but they didn't use boxes. People migrated to the boxes right away. They were a really artistic group, so they came up with a really elegant solution. So I'm going to show you just 2 examples. The puzzle number 1, they came from the group of types of communication. On their table, they wrote out a story of a situation which the participants would be in, where they were locked in the room. They found themselves in this terrible situation. I'd like to calmly inform you that you're trapped in this private room. There's no avoidance of this punishment. I have no empathy for your plight. You have no business enjoying public life because your casual fashion sense is far too offensive. I assert that you desperately need someone to delegate more appropriate outfits. So it's a story that kind of ties into workplace etiquette, that kind of thing. And the specific words that are bolded here are the key to how they figured out the puzzle. So the solution to that puzzle, the table right next to them, they found 8 pieces of paper, and they were cut out, and they had a word on them, and they had a number on them. The number was on the back. 4 of the words represented a good practice for communication in the workplace, and the others were bad practice. Going back to the story here, they had to pick out which of the words were positive words, good words to use in the workplace, and which were negative words. And then based on that, the numbers on the back gave them the lock, or the combination of the lock that opened the box. The effective examples were private, calm, empathetically, they assertively. Some ineffective examples, they publicly talked about things, maybe they were casual at the workplace, they avoided discussion, or they delegated work instead of collaborating with people. We saw communication, and we saw workplace learning, and we saw all that stuff actually come out of this. Where a lot of the puzzles, what they came up with wasn't completely strict with the communication theme that we come up with, but this was a great one that we came out with. Number 2, very interesting one, they were our listening group. They created about a 20-second video with 5 distinct sounds. The first one was a lion, the second one was an elephant, we had an airplane, the roadrunner, and we had notes being played on the piano, which then they figured out spelled, first letter of each spelled learn. And we had this interesting box where you twist and you had to line up the letters. It would open up and there would be a puzzle inside. Once they came up with that puzzle, we tried to come up with try to make it fun. So we had an interactive puzzle where the participants had to do a dance from the Rocky Horror Picture Show.
With your knees, with your hands on your hips, bring your knees in tight, whatever that looks like, and then pelvic thrust, and do it again.
And then once they completed it as a group, and again as a team, they got one of the 4 clues that leads to the end. The 4 cards they got from the 4 puzzles correlated to the cipher, and the cipher gave them a kind of a word jumble. Here is the team figuring out the word jumble. So once they figured out all the numbers, then they adjusted the cipher, and then the numbers would match a letter. So they went through, and it eventually said, "Well done, you've escaped." Their reaction when they finally figured it out was awesome all 4 times that we ran it. So insights from me, were we successful? We wanted to learn what would happen if we put pretty much strangers in the room, but creative people in the same industry, and see what would happen if we tried to build it. By attempting it, we were going to learn something about how it was done. So we got 10 members per, and they all escaped within 28 to 32 minutes. So it turned out to be extremely consistent with how long it took them to complete the puzzles. And all of them did figure out all the puzzles. So number 1, none of the puzzles stumped anyone so bad that they just couldn't continue. And the fact that they were all within 4 minutes of each other, and each group knew the time of the group in front of them, so they were kind of pressured, and we wanted to see how that would affect them. The final group was the one that had the best time. So every group just about got better and better as we went. Learning points, taking away points. A fully functional escape room can be built fast and cheap. Imaginations tend to run wild, especially when you have creative people in the same space. The cheapness of the materials does not impact the enthusiasm at all. Again, just having boxes, locks, paper, markers, and people created their own artwork for clues. I mean, it didn't impact that at all. We ended up with 14 puzzles in total. 2 to 4 less puzzles would have been perfect, and we wouldn't have needed to really intervene at all. We had to give them a couple clues here and there, and myself and one of the other people that ran it, we were a little hint happy, because sometimes when they would get stuck on something really simple that sounded simple to us and the people that made it, was actually really difficult. From a learning point of view and an education point of view, a lot more effort would need to be required to create a fully functioning and featured learning experience. Whether it would be for a company doing onboard training, a teamwork exercise outside of work, there would be a lot of effort that would go into that. Because we didn't come up with any specific learning objectives at the beginning. We didn't have a content debrief with the people that ran through it. We just simply didn't have any time, because each time a group ran through it, we'd put everything back together and run it again. In about 15 minutes, and then another team ran it for half an hour, and then we had 15 minutes to put it back together. We have heard from some of the people that went through it. They loved the experience. If we were going to do it again, we would have specific learning objectives. Again, whether you're doing an onboard training or some sort of team activity that you want to make sure they understand something at the end of it. What we want to do next year is go back as mentors to a completely different group of people and escalate it and figure out, can we do it in a larger space, or let's go the other way and say, can we do it online? Can we do it without any physical tools at all? Can we do it completely online, where maybe the groups go into breakout rooms and they solve their puzzles and come back into the main room, they're collaborating via voice or webcam, that kind of thing. We're still kind of trying to formulate what we want the next version of this to be. But we really had to start at ground zero on campus and figure out, can we even do this? And if so, how does it work? And if so, how would we create something even cooler with that? What we'd love to do next year is get groups from multiple people from the same organization to come in to see how that works. Mainly as an onboarding activity, learning about the company or learning about a process. Say we did about 4DID, or we did it about Agile or something like that, where they had to solve puzzles to understand the concepts. Doing it as a team building exercise, we also talked about that, where it's sort of outside of your normal workflow, but there still is a main theme and idea that comes out of it that everyone gets when they complete it. And my most important takeaway of all is that they're a ton of fun to build and to escape. We got tremendous feedback from each side. I'm not sure who had more fun, the people building it. Some of the people, they were there for just 6 hours sitting on the floor, cutting out newspapers and magazines and drawing stuff, or the people that went through it that felt like this was a challenge, this was a game, they had a time limit, and went through it and were able to work together. So either way, they were a ton of fun to build and to escape.